Welcome, mages, to Sage of Fables. Happy New Year, everyone. Oh god, I'm knocking shit over on my desk. Happy New Year, everyone. I hope your holiday season was wonderful and filled with family or friends, the family that you choose. Yes, I myself got to go back east to visit with my in-laws, which is always very pleasant, very wonderful. And I turned 30. That's right, December 30th was my birthday, and now we're in our dirty 30s and very excited about it. Yeah, I think that's it's pretty much everything for me that's been happening lately. I wanted to kick off the new year with a deck tech, with a casual deck tech for a deck that I built about 6-7 months ago, I would say. And with Path and Prophecy picking up bi-weekly now in the new year, I really wanted to, I thought this would be a good time to cover this deck. So for those of you who don't know, Path and Prophecy is the D&D game that I run over on the Venture Mains channel on now bi-weekly Mondays, 6:30 p.m. PST, starting January 3rd and then going every other week from there. And my cast of players are all players who are from the Magic community. So we have Callahan and Charles from the Mind Sculptors, and then we have Claby from CNC Power Hour, and Lenny, aka Jenny's Gay Pride Mate, who is one of the authors over on EDH Rec, and is a part of the Scrap Trawlers, who stream every Sunday? Every Sunday or every other Sunday, I believe. But yeah, so they are all fantastic players, so happy to have them, and our D&D campaign is set in the world of Saros, which is this, ancient Grecian-inspired setting. And so my favorite god from the Theran pantheon is Klothys. For me personally, I am really big into arts of divination, so reading tarot cards, astrology, casting runes, from the Viking heathen religion, all of these methods that are sort of to help you foretell the future or to read signs. It's something that has always been something that's really near and dear to my heart, in both as like a spiritual practice and as like an intellectual deep dive into something. Because I think it's really interesting is how we are always so, as people, as humanity, is always so concerned with trying to get a glimpse of what's going to happen into the future, to try and be prepared, or find the best course of action. And so throughout pretty much every culture throughout time, there has been some sort of practice of divination, whether it's with bones or with runes or with rocks or with cards or by cutting animals open and reading their reading the signs within their intestines, which is called horomancy, by the way. Yeah, I think it's just it's really interesting. It's this thread that ties all of humanity together across time and across space. And so Klothys, being this part of this first generation of gods in Saros, is the goddess of fate and fury. And I love that combination of concepts. One, alliteration. Perfect. Love alliteration. But also that she's not about the sort of predestination of souls or anything, or about, people who are destined to become heroes. She's really more about upholding the cosmic and divine order of things on Saros, and the wrath that you incur for trying to violate it, for your hubris of thinking that you could overtake this sort of cosmic order which is keeping everything in this plane together. And so, as part of this first generation of gods on Saros, between her and Krufix, what is interesting about the two of them together is that they don't require devotion in order to be sustained in the way that the other Theran gods do. The other Theros gods, but you have the second generation, who are the monocolored ones. If you have Erebos, Heliod, Thassa, and Perforos, and Nylea. And then the third generation, who are all the two-color gods, the two-color pairings. And so if we look at the evolution of the Saros gods, it very much reflects the evolution of humanity. So beginning with Klothys and Klothys, Klothys being the god of mysteries and horizons, and Klothys being this god of fate and fury. It's interesting as we look at it because, and since they aren't reliant on dedication, on devotion in order to sustain them and to empower them, I think it really reflects the sort of the beginnings of early humanity, where when humans first are becoming sentient and aware of their surroundings, first their curiosity is piqued, and so we have Klothys, the god of mysteries. And so I think that really much reflects, the curiosity into our surroundings and trying to learn and understand what makes the world tick. And then as we do discover patterns and... Sorry, my cat's having a freak out right now. You gonna come sit down? No? You're just gonna be over there? Okay. If she comes back, I'll hold her up for you all to see. And as humanity does begin to understand these sort of natural patterns that occur within the world, we now have a god who is in charge of upholding that divine order. So we have the mystery and the curiosity, and we have the discovery of the patterns. And I think those are so wonderfully paired together. Klothys in Saros only, in lore, has only resurfaced into the consciousness of regular Therans, of the people of Saros, because cat because she has her primary... Oh, let me see. Let me show you all. Fluffy kitty, she's having a freak out. Your little princess tower. Yeah, you gonna run across my desk again? Probably. That's Cora. That's Cora, or Cat. Yes, after the second avatar. Klothys, Klothys, first generation of Saros gods. Yes. So, and so I think. So that's right, Klothys and her story. So Klothys was brought into being, manifested as this goddess of fate and fury. And at that time in ancient Theran history, these titans wandered the earth, and the titans if you think about the titans, of course, in ancient Grecian myth, but also I think is also reflected nicely in Viking lore, in the Prose and Poetic Edda, is that titans reflect these very chthonic and deep and deeply seated and primeval fears of humanity, of these, the dangers that exist out there that are out of our control. These forces, these truly primal forces of the world that could rend, worlds apart. And so, as humanity on Saros begins to, or I guess peoplekind, because there aren't just humans on Saros, but as peoplekind on Saros, became sentient, became aware, became curious, they needed some way for these titans to be banished and to sort of begin to exert control over their environment. And so eventually they did. The gods were born to deal with, were born of their hopes and prayers in order to deal with the titans. And then Klothys willingly took up this position to be their jailer, to make sure that the seal that is holding the titans within the underworld stays sealed. And so she disappeared from the Theran pantheon for, thousands of years. And then eventually, with the whole saga with Elspeth, Elspeth was kind of the final straw, and Klothys was like, y'all are fucking with fate too goddamn much, and now I need to come from my jail, and from this jail, and deal with all of you who are leaving the underworld, who are messing with the cosmic order of things. This is all too much, and I need to send out my agents of fate in order to deal with all of you. And And ironically, in leaving her spot, she has now weakened the veil between the mortal plane and the underworld, which now allows for more things, more people, more creatures to be able to leave the underworld and thus further disrupt fate. So we'll see if in our campaign some of these things might arise. If in the prophecy that I gave to Lenny's character Telos, there is a very specific reference to Klothys, or a part of like the lore of Klothys, in his prophecy that I dictated to him. So if you all want to go check it out, I believe that was episode 2. Sorry, that's episode 2. See if you can get the reference, and then you can DM me on Twitter to see if you figured it out. But yeah, so I really wanted to make a commander deck about Klothys because, for one, she's a kick-ass deity and, something that I'm very personally interested in. But two, I also really like her card mechanics. And I didn't have a green-black deck yet, a green-red deck yet, so I was like, perfect. Let's make that. And so without further ado, let's actually look at Klothys. So, she is 1 red-green for a 4/5 legendary enchantment creature, god, who is indestructible, and she has a typical Saros clause of, as long as your devotion to red and green is less than 7, Klothys is in a creature. So, as part of it for that line of text, since Klothys doesn't actually require devotion in order to sustain herself, I don't really agree with that line being there. However, I do recognize that they're trying to keep things consistent within the MTG sphere. So it, from a game design perspective, for this being part of a cycle of cards, it does make sense. But flavor-wise, I think doesn't really make sense. And then her other ability is, at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, exile target card from a graveyard. If it was a land card, add red or green. Otherwise, you gain 2 life and Klothys deals 2 damage to each opponent. So I really love this. I really love this. Klothys has resurfaced from this prison within the underworld, and so her whole mission right now is to make sure that people stay. People and creatures and things need to stay in their respective spheres of existence. And so by her exiling things from graveyards, banishing them forever, and then I think is a great ability. And so looking at these, of how I wanted to build this as a deck, for one, her being an enchantment, great enchantment colors, I decided to lean into that avenue as sort of an enchantress style deck. And also to bring in the concepts of fate and fury into this deck, I have done so as well. So the things that I wanted to focus on first is, all right, let's shrink her down and move on over here. I wanted to think about how it is that I could bring in those concepts of fate and fury into this deck. And so one of the things to think about was, all right, well, what is going to draw this god's ire? And with that, we have... These are the cards that I've labeled as Fury. So when you do these things, the Goddess of Fate says, no, please stop doing that. I don't like that. And you'll be punished for it. So this is a deck that is focused around enchantments that punish your opponents for doing shit. So, looking at first, we have Ether Sting, an enchantment for 3 and a red. Whenever one of your opponents play a creature spell, it does 1 damage to that player. Play creatures, you're getting bopped. And then we have Ancient Runes, 2 and a red. During each player's upkeep, Ancient Runes deals 1 damage to that player for each artifact they control. Guess what? There are no artifacts in this deck. So yeah, playing a bunch of artifacts, get out of here. We don't like that. Burning Earth, 3 and a red for an enchantment. Whenever a player taps a non-basic land for mana, Burning Earth deals 1 damage to that player. We run like 36 basics. I think we play 2 non-basics, and one of them is Valakut. I can't remember what the other one was off the top of my head. But yeah. So playing a bunch of non-basics, we're going to punish that greedy mana base. Cindervines, red and a green for an enchantment. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, Cindervines deals 1 damage to that player. Pay 1 generic, sacrifice Cindervines, destroy target artifact or enchantment, and Cindervines deals 2 damage to that permanent's controller. Playing a bunch of non-creature spells, don't like that. Citadel of Payne, 2 and a red for an enchantment. At the end of each player's turn, Citadel of Payne deals X damage to that player, where X is the number of untapped lands they control. You trying to hold up mana to interact? Don't like that. Take damage. Primal Order, 2 green for an enchantment. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, Primal Order deals damage to that player equal to the number of non-basic lands they control. Were you playing non-basics? Double ping. And Rolling Vortex, 1 and a red for an enchantment. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, it does 1 damage to them. Me, too. I'll take it. That's fine. And whenever a player casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast that spell, Rolling Vortex does 5 damage to that player. Pay a red. Your opponents can't gain life this turn. So you try to play free spells? Get that shit out of here. We don't fucking want it. Play on curve, use all of your mana, and don't do too much of anything, otherwise you will draw the ire of Klothys. So this is what her fury looks like. And with Fate, I was thinking it's a little bit more nebulous, but the thing that I thought of was, well, Klothys being the god of destiny, of fate, the thing that all mortals have in common, and even most gods, is that they are fated to die. And so with that, this kind of concept of the house always wins in the end. You all are guaranteed to die, and this is how sometimes when we need to dispatch our agents of fate to make sure that everything stays nice and tidy and orderly, sometimes we gotta wake up and choose violence. And so to help with that, we have Awaken the Ancient, 1 red for an enchantment aura. You enchant a mountain, and the enchanted mountain is a 7/7 red giant creature with haste. It's still a land. So I love to think about, Klothys animating this mountain to go after this, this party of heroes who are, upsetting and toiling with the order of the gods. And yeah, I love the art on this card too. Ooh, could you imagine? You come over a hillside and you see this motherfucker coming after you? That's terrifying. And then we have Beastmaster Ascension. Classic green win condition, an enchantment for 2 and a green. Whenever a creature you control attacks, you may put a quest counter on Beastmaster Ascension. And as long as it has 7 or more quest counters, creatures you control get +5/+5. So to use the very animals and beasts within the plane of Saros to track and hunt down, and take out anyone who is trying to upset the cosmic order. And then, sometimes as a god, sometimes although they're petty and dumb and petulant, sometimes we have to rely on the other gods around. And so we have the Dictate of the Twin Gods, an enchantment for 3 red. It has flash, and if a source would deal damage to a permanent or player, it does double that damage to a permanent or player instead. With Klothys' ability to exile a card and have it, to exile a non-land card and have Klothys do damage to each opponent, I really wanted to take advantage of ways where we can double that damage, where to reflect that she is, very focused on trying to eliminate these movers and shakers who are going about the world and trying to mess with things. And so, with the twin gods being Erois and Mogis on Saros, sometimes it's helpful to use these other more petulant and petty gods to your benefit. And with that, with Fire Emancipation, is definitely a card that very much thematically works with her in terms of name, since she emancipated herself from the underworld. If it's an enchantment for 3 red, and if a source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it does triple that damage to that permanent or player instead. And along a similar vein, we have the Furnace of Wrath, 1 red, For an enchantment, if a source would deal damage to a creature or player, it does double that damage to that creature or player instead. So we have lots of ways in order to double and triple damage to get life totals low, and in combination with all of the things like Cindervine and Ancient Runes, we're dealing out just lightning bolts constantly. Shocks and lightning bolts to everyone. And then with Awaken the Ancient along the same lines, we have Nissa's Zendikon, an enchantment aura for 3 and a green. An enchanted land is a 4/4 elemental with reach and haste, and it's still a land. And when the enchanted land dies, return that card to its owner's hand. So it's really nice. It's a nice way. If it dies, you don't lose it forever. It comes back. And then a card that is a personal favorite of mine, Sandworm Convergence, 6 green for an enchantment. Creatures with flying can attack you or planeswalkers you control, and at the beginning of your end step, create a 5/5 green worm creature token. So it's a nice way in Gruul to deal with all of those pesky flyers to make sure that they're not coming after the Goddess of Fate, because that would be foolhardy. No, we can't have that. Instead, you must go elsewhere. And then one card that is that I had to include because it depicts Klothys in the art is the Binding of the Titans, a saga enchantment for 1 and a green. And the first chapter reads, each player puts the top 3 cards of their library into their graveyard. The second chapter, exile up to 2 target cards from graveyards. For each creature card exiled this way, you gain a life. And the third chapter, return target creature or land card from your graveyard to your hand. So works nicely with Klothys' ability to sort of fill up the yards to make sure that we have stuff to exile, and then to gain a little bit of benefit off of it, and for our third chapter to be able to return something from our graveyard to our hand. It's definitely nice utility. So that's our Fate and Fury sections, and of course, in order to make this deck go, we need some enablers in this deck, and so with this being a very Enchantress focused deck, we have a bunch of enchantment enablers. So we are thankfully ingrained, so we run all of the effects that allow us to draw cards whenever we cast enchantments or have enchantments enter the battlefield. The first of which being our Gothian enchantment, Enchantress, 1 and a green for a 0/1 human druid with Shroud. And she reads whenever you cast an enchantment spell, draw a card. Enchantress's Presence, very much the same thing, but an enchantment for 2 and a green. Casting enchantments, drawing cards. Verduran Enchantress, a human druid that's a 0/2 for 1 green. Drawing cards when we cast enchantments. And then we have Eidolon of Blossoms, 2 green, for a 2/2 spirit, enchantment spirit, and has Constellation, so whenever it or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. So it's very nice. It's really nice to have a reliable way to, just draw a card whenever we cast our commander. And since our commander only costs 3 mana, it's, very reliable to be able to throw one of these down first and then cast her. And with Verduran Enchantress and Idol of Blossoms giving us 2 pips of green devotion, that helps in making sure that Klothys is a creature so that we can get in for beats with her, because she's a 4/5. This is definitely very respectable. And along those lines, we have Colossal Majesty, 2 and a green for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw a card. Guess how big our commander is. And we have a lot of other creatures in this deck too, that satisfy the 4 or greater clause, in addition to our commander. So that works out nicely. This is a card that I do adore. And then Destiny Spinner, 1 and a green for an enchantment creature human, a 2/3. Creatures and enchantment spells you control can't be countered. And then it has this clause this activated ability for 3 and a green. Target land you control becomes an XX elemental creature with trample and haste until end of turn, where X is the number of enchantments you control. It's still a land. So it's a really nice way to be able to, when in the late game, if you're stalled out on mana, or if you're stalled out on cards, but you have, a ton of mana available, to be able to animate some lands and go to Beat Street. And then for 1 and a green, we have Herald of the Pantheon, a creature centaur shaman, a 2/2. that says enchantment spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and whenever you cast an enchantment, you gain a life. So nice enchantment cost reduction, always good. Gaining life, always relevant, because, sometimes our enchantments hurt us too. And then we have Citizen Champion, for 2 and a green, a creature human warrior, a 1/3 with Constellation. Whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on Citizen Champion and draw a card. So it's very nice. It's sweet little enchantress effect that gets bigger every time you cast an enchantment, which is very cool. And then with that, since we are doing an enchantment theme for our card draw and all of our synergies, our ramp is very much following the same suit. So instead of doing the typical just sort of land ramp, I decided to focus on enchantment ramp. So Dawn's Reflection, 3 and a green for an enchantment aura, enchant land. Whenever enchanted land is tapped 4 mana, its controller adds an additional 2 mana in any combination of colors. And then so having all these sort of enchantments that are very much along these lines, where whenever you tap a land, you get extra mana or you get mana of any color to be able to ramp us out. And these are nice too, because, I want to be able to make sure that Klothys is a creature so that she can attack and block. And so that's a nice way to synergize a ramp package into what this deck wants to do, which is to cast enchantments, make sure that our commanders turn on and is a creature, and be able to power more stuff out onto the battlefield. Not a lot of people in my casual metas run too many strip mine effects, so it's never really something I've come into as a problem. I can definitely see in some metas where stacking a bunch of these onto your lands, and if you just get strip mined or Field of Ruin, you get totally blown out. But as it is for me, all of these work perfectly fine. And then we also have, in terms of enchantment wrap, we have Mana Reflection, so 4 green for an enchantment. If you tap a permanent 4 mana, it produces twice of that much mana instead. So that works out really nicely when our lands have, things that allow us to produce 3, 4, 5 mana out of them to be able to double that production, even if we have very few lands. And then a new one from Modern Horizons 2 that I do adore is, because we needed to give this to green, Sanctum Weaver, 1 and a green for a 0/2 enchantment creature dryad, and tap, add X mana in any one color where X is the number of enchantments you control. So, I'll take Sarah's Sanctum color shifting. It's real good. It's just real good. I don't think they should have made that a green card. I think it should have been white. But here we are. All right. Well, thanks, Wizards. So we have our card draw, we have a ramp, we have our flavor package, and then just kind of some fun stuff that I enjoy in this deck are Arasta of the Endless Web. Another creature we might see coming up in this Saros campaign. But 2 green for a 3/5 legendary enchantment legendary enchantment creature spider with reach, and whenever an opponent casts an instant or sorcery, create a 1/2 green spider creature token with reach. So I love this card. I always get shit tons of spiders. I have this one, and I have the Dragon Lair spider, which is 2 red, green, for like a 4 or 5, I think, something like that. And whenever an opponent casts a spell, you get a 1/1 insect. So the two of those together, you just got all bunch of creepy crawlies running around, and I love it. So I'm a big fan of Arasta. And then we have Footfall Crater, which is a nice little utility aura for 1 red mana, enchant a land, and enchanted land has tap, target creature gains trample and haste until end of turn with cycling for 1. So it's really nice because Klothys doesn't have trample natively, and a lot of our other sort of big beaters don't have trample natively, and it's a nice way to give them trample and haste to get in that extra damage. And then one that I love from Kaldheim, Old Growth Troll, green for a creature troll warrior, a 4/4 with trample. And when Old Growth Troll Old Growth Troll dies. Those are hard words to say together. If it was a creature, return it to the battlefield. It's an aura enchantment with Enchant Forest you control with Enchanted Forest has tap, add green, and pay a generic, and tap, sacrifice this land. Create a tapped 4/4 green troll warrior creature token with trample. So it's really nice. Like, you get a 4/4 in the beginning. It dies. You can enchant a land. You can tap that land to give you another troll. I think this card is just really cool, and it's really unusual, and I've never seen anyone else run it. So I thought, you know what? Add 3 green to our devotion. Give me a cool boy that does the stuff that this deck wants to do. But yeah, that's pretty much this deck. I do love it. I always have a blast playing it. I've won with it a few times, and I just love when you get a couple of those like super punishing enchantments out on the battlefield, and people start to understand what the heck is happening. And it is always a blast. Yeah, big fan of this deck. And, so tell me, dear friends, how would you build a Klothys deck? What includes or excludes would you make? How do you feel about the goddess of fate and fury and destiny? Would you be one of those heroes full of hubris trying to topple the divine order or to fight to establish your own destiny? Yeah, let me know. Tell me what you think. But until then, cool cats, I will catch you next time. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Moxfield at Staff of Sage. And yeah, deck list down in the show notes below. And peace, friends.